Richard Donner, ladies and gentlemen, sitting in the audience.
A shootout, right? It's a shootout!
There's a lot of horror movies that are actually showing this festival. Aside from 976 Evil, you also had, on TV, you had Friday's Curse, you had Highway to Hell, you directed your episode of Tales from the Crypt. Will you ever return to horror?
Yeah, no, I don't, I might, it depends, but it was a great thing to do, because at the time, no one wanted to do it, and there was a lot of kind of interesting stuff being made, like, boy, it was 1989, 1990, around there, and so it was a great entry for me into the movie business. But yeah, if the right thing came along, if it evolved, like, into something, it always keeps evolving into something else, so if it turned into something I was interested in, I think I would.
You're not only a writer, you're also a director, and tonight we're going to talk about both of your creative habits for writing and directing, but you've had the good fortune of working with some great directors, ranging from Clint Eastwood to the Scott brothers, both Ridley and Tony, and of course the great Richard Donner. So I'm curious, what were some of the things that maybe were eye-opening for you working with these great directors that kind of resonated when you started directing on your own, if there's anything in particular about their work habits that you gleaned?
Yeah, the biggest thing
Careful what you say.
Oh, he's out there.
Richard Donner, ladies and gentlemen, sitting in the audience. With us tonight, we're ready to open.
Well, yeah, I'll start with Dick then. When we were doing conspiracy theory, he realized one day that I wasn't happy with something he was doing, some scene or something like that. And I was walking back we broke for lunch, and I was walking to base camp, and he came up in his golf cart because he doesn't walk. And he said, "Get in." And I thought, I was irritated at him, and I said, "No, I'm going to walk." And he said, he just get in. And I thought he was going to fire me. And he went on to explain to me that if I wanted to direct, if I wanted the script to turn out exactly the way I wanted it to turn out, then I had to direct it. And he said there was a big myth that directors come in and steamroll writers and things like that. And he said that he had a different life than me, and he had led a different life than me, and he saw the world differently than I saw it. So he was never going to direct a film other than how he saw it and how his life dictated it. So it was never going to be the way I thought it should be. And I thought it was a really wise thing. And so he said if you want it to be exactly the way you want it to be, then you have to direct. And I think that afternoon he gave me an episode. He was the producer of Tales from the Crypt, and he gave me an episode that afternoon to direct. So, and didn't fire me, and did a great job too. So but that was really the key thing. It was just that you have to, if you can't find someone that sees it along with you exactly, you have to go out and do it yourself.
You won an Oscar for co-writing 1997's LA Confidential with Curtis Hanson, a great film. Award for that as well, based on the great James Ellroy's novel. I'm curious, just before tonight's film, last question, what was the most important lesson that you learned as a writer on LA Confidential? What was your toughest scene that you had to creatively crack?
There was, probably because we had to cut time out of it, and so because it's so plot heavy, every time we cut 5 minutes out of the movie, it wouldn't make sense anymore. Literally, the whole movie would just fall apart, and we were under a lot of pressure from Warner Brothers and the producers and everything to cut time out of the movie. And we would move things around and do things, and they'd want more time out of the movie, and it would fall apart again. And we finally had a point where we couldn't make it make sense anymore. And there's a scene where Russell Crowe comes in to try to kill Guy Pearce, and they fight in the squad room. And we did about 5 hours of reshoots, so that we just close-ups of Russell and Guy, and rewrote basically all the plot in the movie in that scene to make it make sense again. So as lauded as it is, if we hadn't shot that, everyone would be talking about how little sense that movie made.
That's interesting. That's a good way to use your reshoot time, and probably cost effective too.
Yeah, no, and it was a puzzle, just trying to get it all so it worked, and we did it. I thought very well.
And the exposition in that scene was good, so I mean, it came out great. So I did lie. That was not the last question before tonight's film. I had you in my screening series for the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, and you told the most fantastic story that really only you could tell. Because yes, tonight's film is called Legend, but Brian is a legend of himself. That he's a man that Oscar weekend, when he won for LA Confidential, he actually won 2 awards that weekend, and he's the only man to have ever won those 2 awards within a day or 2 of each other. I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to let you take it from there.
Okay, well, I won the Razzie Award. I think the Academy Awards were on Monday, I think.
Everybody know what a Razzie is? Kind of littly know it
The
as.
worst screenplay of the year. Well, they have
Worst
a whole
film.
spectrum of awards, but I got the worst screenplay of the year for The Postman. And that's like a 5-hour story right there. But anyways, I got that, and then the next day I won the Academy Award. So my Razzie doesn't show up. I keep waiting for my Razzie to show up.
They never say anything.
It's announced, and you're ridiculed, but there's no Razzie. So I called the office and I said, "Where's my Razzie?" And they said, we don't have a Razzie. We just have the one we bring out for the awards, for the presentations. So I said, if you're going to give me a Razzie, I want a Razzie. So they had to make one. And then they made it really badly. I still have it. And then I had an office at Warner's at the time, and they came to Warner's and they presented the Razzie to me. And I shamed them into giving me my Razzie.
So where does it sit? Is it by the Oscar?
Yeah.
It's like yin and yang.
Yeah.
Only man in history. Razzie one day, Oscar next day. Brian, only man in history. Legend is based on 1995's John Pearson book, The Profession of Violence, The Rise and Fall of the Cray Twins. I'm curious how you became involved in the project.
I had heard about them. It's a roundabout story. I got, again, to go on about Warner Brothers, but right after LA Confidential, I got asked by them to go on tour with Robert Plant and Jimmy Page to do a Led Zeppelin biopic. And it was a disaster. I got to New York or New Jersey, and Robert Plant wouldn't speak to me because he didn't want a movie made. So after 3 days of this, it was over. But they had a manager that was missing a finger, and he was a very tough East London guy. And I asked him if he would tell me where his finger was, and because since I was little, if any was missing a digit or an ear or whatever, I gotta know where it is. And he said, he held up his hand. He said that was the Crays. Crays took that, and I didn't know I thought it was like a scuba diving attack or something.
Crayfish.
Yeah, and he went on to explain how they came to ask for money once in backstage in the 60s at a club in London, and he refused to pay, and they cut his finger off. And I thought, well, I gotta check these guys out. And subsequently, I read a few things about him and Googled them and things. I don't know if Google had been invented in 1998, but however I did it. And subsequently, but never thought of writing anything about him, and I was contacted by the production company working title who I had written a screenplay for called Green Zone, and they asked me if I would be interested, and I said I'd investigate and try to see if I could come up with a way to write a script and all these things, and I put that scene in the film in a montage, and we got a letter from the guy's lawyer threatening to sue us if we included it because he said it never happened, and he could prove he was in jail at the time and all this stuff. And so he had actually made the story up. He lost it in an accident, but it was good for him to pass up. And so he'd been telling that story for years, and it wasn't true. But it became a theme with the Craves that everything you heard about them was a lie or not true or gross exaggeration or on both sides as far as something good they might have done and something terrible they might have done. So it was the start of trying to sort out what the movie truth was anyways.
I'm curious about the casting of Tom Hardy. It's great casting. I'm wondering if he was always going to play both brothers, or if you were going to have him play one brother, that you were going to pair him with another brother.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I didn't want it to be a gimmick. I was afraid if I cast one actor as both, it would be a gimmick. And by the same token, if I cast one, then I would be limited by having to find someone that looked like him. And I sent Tom the script and asked him to read it for Reggie. Reggie being the lead, I thought I'll get Reggie first and see how it goes from there. But maybe he doesn't even want to play both parts. And we had dinner, and all I talked about was Ron this and Ron that, and Ron. And all I talked about was Reggie. And we got to this moment of sort of staring at each other. And Tom said, "I'll give you Reggie if you give me Ron." And I said, "That's a deal." And we kind of didn't quite realize what we had just agreed to do. But from there, everything became, how do we make this go away? How do we make Tom go away and get left with Reggie and Ron?
You picked a very interesting entry point into their lives, where they're kind of on their meteoric rise. There was a lot to skip about growing up tough, being in the Army, being jailed in the Army, dishonorably discharged. You know, it wasn't their first time in jail. They've been in and out a lot. How did you pick your starting point for something so rich with so much material to draw from?
Well, the thing I don't like about biopics is when kind of cradle to grave stories where, you know, you have little kids playing them and then teenagers playing them, and then if they can get away with playing themselves at 19 and so on. And those movies always feel like they stop and start to me, and I was very keen for it to stand on its own as a film. It's just a story of these guys that you should be able to. In the French Connection, you don't see Gene Hackman as a little boy at the beginning and watching cars go by and wishing he could hop in with it. So it seemed, it's a thing I prefer not to do if I can get away with it.
It makes sense. It's interesting for the dynamic of the brothers because they're very yin and yang. Ron is very interested in the mythos of being a gangster and drawn to violence and also mentally ill, whereby Reggie, the way that you presented him, has enjoyed his rise, but can be swayed by his new wife to maybe calm down a little. And they seem to represent the best and the worst of each other simultaneously and are kind of pulling back and forth at each other that way. I'm curious how difficult that dynamic was to capture on the page, because as a writer, you don't want all of your characters to sound alike, but these are identical twin brothers that are both in the game together.
Yeah, well, and there was enough differences in real life between them that it was fairly easy to delineate them separately. But I found it very interesting. I found it was hard to sort out the heart of Reggie in a way, because Ron is very straightforward. He's very honest. It's what you see is what you get. He does what he does. He makes no apologies. He doesn't hide. And Reggie was much more. Reggie lies. Reggie's one thing to one person one moment and something else to someone else the next moment. And that's how he seemed in my research too. And it was very hard to pin him down and just sort of get to the heart of him. So Ron was easier to write than Reggie was in a way.
You mentioned research a second ago. I'm curious what kind of research you did beyond the book. I mean, I know there were things like when Reggie got out of jail, when he was given that leniency right before he died, the BBC did a documentary with him in 2001 called The Final Word, Reggie Cray's Last Interview. There's the 2009 documentary, The Gangster and the Perverted Peer, and, you know, other things ranging from books by associates of theirs to the 1990 movie The Craze. So I'm curious what you drew upon outside of the book.
Well, the book itself is a journalistic account of them, and so it was very useful as far as the timeline goes, and these events happen on these dates, and you could count on it being accurate. But as far as the dramatics of the story, it wasn't, it was pretty steered clear of a lot of that kind of stuff. But like you said, there's probably 50 books written about them. And I think there's 2 new ones this year. And every year there's 2 more, or 3 more. And a lot of them very schlocky and tabloid-esque. And what's interesting is any event, like when Ron kills Cornell and the Blind Beggar, everyone knows what night it happened, but there's 25 reasons why it happened. All over the place, ranging from just extreme contradictions in everything they did, why it happened. So I had to take all that and try to do a forensic kind of, I forensics the dramatics of it all and tried to figure out what the motivation was for a lot of things. But luckily there's about 6 people that were their contemporaries who I met with and talked to a lot that were all in their own way very helpful to fill in some blanks, and especially with Francis.
What was the most interesting piece of research you came across, the most strange and surreal that did not end up in your movie?
The photographer, David Bailey, who knew them really well, told me a very funny story about being in one of their pubs one night, and Francis was flirting with him, and Reggie was in the other room, and he was terrified Reggie was going to come out and see her talking to him. He was jealous. And it was just a very funny story, but it just never, I could never work it in. The most helpful thing was there's a guy named Chris Lambriano who went to prison with them. When they all went to prison, he went for 15 years. And I spent the day with him, and I could never work out a lot of things about Frances, and people didn't remember her very well, and just remembered her as another pretty face, and that kind of thing. And I said to him, at the end of this long day together, we were outside in the twilight, outside one of their pubs. And I said, what can you tell me about Frances? And he said, Frances is, without skipping a beat, he said, Frances is the reason we all went to prison. And he told me how after she died, Reggie shut down, and he always used to sort everything out. So if someone in the neighborhood was seen talking to the police, he'd be by, knocking on the door the next day, and asking what they were talking about, what they want to know. If there was an investigation going on, he'd bribe police, he'd pay off jurors, and he'd always keep any fire burning around out. And then after she died, that all stopped. And he just was, the way he described it, he was just sitting around waiting for the police to come get him. And when he told me that story, a bunch of things that I had been scratching my head over that I couldn't work out all suddenly made sense. And I don't think I could have written the script without that conversation.
It led to a really interesting decision whereby you decided to make Frances an unreliable narrator because she's actually dead. What went into that, and then how much time did you decide to give her for her voiceovers? Because they were more character building than pure exposition, which was refreshing rather than using them for exposition. So I'm just kind of curious how you leveled that.
Well, I didn't want to invent anything as far as she went. So I wanted to stick to what was known about her. And there's a lot of gaps and things, but I didn't want to, I felt like she was off limits as far as inventing things about her. And the narration allowed me to give her a separate voice that to me was acceptable to give her, where I could have her say things I don't know whether she said, but she's saying them as the narrator and from beyond the grave. And in a way it gave her her own duality, as far as she's a very sincere and innocent character in the script, but in the film, but in the narration she's much wiser and has a different point of view. So she's, in a way, 2 different people herself.
How far along were you when you made that decision to add her as the narrator? Did you have a draft done at that point?
Oh no, yeah, after that, I hadn't written anything before that conversation.
Okay.
And she was narrating right from the very first thing I wrote in the script was her opening narration.
Let's talk about your habit for a second as a writer. When you sit down to write, how important is outlining to your process, if it is?
Yeah, I mean, outlining is probably the thing I spend 75% of the whole time on, because I think a movie is so limiting in the amount of time you have, whether it's an hour and 45 minutes or 220, it's not much different really. It's not, a novel could be 175 pages or 1,000 pages, and And the structure of a movie is so important that I just outline to death, really, until I can't look at it anymore, and then I start.
How long did you spend outlining this?
Probably about 5 months or so,
Wow. And then how long did it take once you sat down to script it?
about a month.
So it really does prep you, so you're just ready to go,
Yeah.
basically, because you know exactly where you're going.
Yeah.
Now, do you find it important to stray from your outline, or do you try and stay relevant?
No, I usually stay, not every moment's outlined, so there's things that surprise you while you're writing it, but I stick to the outline.
Talk about your days, how you spend them. Do you have a page count that you set for yourself when you're scripting, or do you have a certain amount of hours that you like to write each day?
Yeah, it's just hours, and it's every day of the week, and I get up very early and work. Probably start at 6, and then by 11, 90% of what I'm going to get done that day I'm done with. But then I keep going until 4 or 5, because I think it's diminished returns, but all that kind of frustration at the end of the day gets you primed for the next day.
How many drafts would you say Legend went through?
Not many. I think 2.
2 total drafts. Wow. That's freaking fantastic. That's great. As a director, preparation is really important. That's where a director's habit lies, so that the shoot could go smoothly. And I heard something that your original iteration was that you wanted to, if you could have your way about it, shoot half the movie with Hardy as one brother, then go back and reshoot with him as the second brother. Talk about how that plan would have worked, and at what point you realized you needed to abandon it, and why.
Well, the idea was to just concentrate on Reggie, and then he'd go away and gain weight and all those things that I think we faked, but we faked it pretty well, I think. And that was the kind of tell God your plan. And then it quickly fell apart because there were almost everything was locations, so we couldn't hold the locations, we couldn't do split screens, the cameras were all locked off, and we couldn't guarantee we could get our camera positions back exactly. And Tom had to go to start shooting Revenant, so he had a hard out, and we just probably a week of fantasy, and then we got down to reality.
How long was your schedule?
50 days.
50 days, okay. And I heard that out of those 50 days, 35 of them was Hardy playing both brothers.
Yeah, probably about that 30 or so, yeah.
So how did you prepare him for that? How did you as a director guide your actor through this role switching that needed to happen from one setup to another each day?
Yeah, I didn't really, because if I had hired him to play Ron, he could have done that. And if I had hired him to play Reggie, he could have done that. So it wasn't really any difference for what he had to do. Or even directing him. I direct Ron as Ron and Reggie as Reggie. But really, the real trick was to get the dynamic between the brothers going, because he's never across from himself. It was almost like if you had 2 lead actors who hated each other and wouldn't come on set for each other. So Reggie would stay in his trailer while Ron worked, and vice versa. And it was we rehearsed, he and I would rehearse in the morning, very long rehearsals in the morning, much longer than I would normally do. And
How long, sorry to interrupt?
a couple of hours, as opposed to just walking through it and then waiting for everyone to get to set. And I learned that from Dick. It was just bring them to set and rehearse, and they'll tell you where to put the camera and all those things, which all were true, But in this case, it wasn't going to work out that way. And so we rehearsed, he recorded Ron's dialogue so we could play Ron back in Reggie's ear.
So he was wearing an earpiece while you were filming live?
Yeah. And we had to get it down very tight so that he could overlap himself, which turned out to be the thing which helped sell it a lot. But the strangest thing was on the overs. We had a body double for Tom, so the back of Ron's head is almost always the body double, because we didn't want to mix it, because it would start to fall apart. But on the overs onto Reggie, and Ron moves his hands a lot and waves around with cigars, and Tom had to decide what all that was going to be before he shot it, teach it to the body double, who then had to do it, and then Tom would come in and do it after the body double had already established it on all the overs. And if it didn't all sync up, we couldn't cut back and forth. And for whatever reason, I thought that was the trickiest thing. He did too, and that's the thing we've worked out the most, and having to do all that and have it feel spontaneous at the same time.
So you would rehearse on set while the crew was lighting and setting up camera each day for an hour or so.
Yeah.
Was there a rehearsal period before the film started where it was just you for a week or two? No, okay.
No, we just talked about it. I don't like to rehearse.
Interesting.
Yeah, we rehearsed the action a lot. All the fights we rehearsed a lot for 3 weeks beforehand. But that was it.
Where did the title come from?
Well, one of the first images I saw, and even when I'm writing, I collect a lot of photo images as opposed to verbal images. It was a picture of his hearse, and there was a huge arrangement on the side of his hearse in carnations that spelled out legend.
For Reggie?
Yeah, for Reggie, which is what they thought of him, the wise guys, so to speak, who bought those flowers. And then I thought, especially in London, it's such a mythic story in a way, it builds and it grows and it gets stranger and stranger every year that goes by, and to the point where it's like the legend of Robin Hood or the legend of King Arthur or the legend of the great things. And very hard to, even though they've only been dead a short while, really, especially Reggie, it's very hard to get to the truth of any of it. So legend seemed like as good a title as I was going to come up with.
Wearing both hats as writer and director, that means that if there needs to be a rewrite on set, you could do it. Were there any things that while you were filming needed to be rewritten?
You know, we did, I like to ad lib, and the joke is I'll throw out my own pages faster than any director I ever worked for. But it's fun. I find it fun, and it's alive and all that. But we had a scene when Ron, after we shot Cornell, we had a different scene than the one that's in the film, where Reggie's got to clean him up and put him to bed. And I was reading it on the way in to set, and I thought this doesn't really work anymore the way that the whole thing's gone. And I got to set, and Tom was on set instead of at hair and makeup, and the first said, Tom wants to talk to you, and I went down to set, and he said, I read the scene, I don't think it works. It was the same thing I was thinking. So we sat down and we worked out a whole new scene for it, which is the scene with the cake and the burning the clothes and all that whole conversation that takes place was completely done the morning of that day we shot that.
Wow, and that scene also featured their mother, and she's a little bit off a rocker by her own right. I'm curious if any iterations ever had a little more of good old Violet Cray.
Yeah, we had a scene with her talking to Reggie when Ron was in the hospital. When he was in Broadmoor at the beginning of the film. There's a scene where she's asking him if he's going to go visit him and don't forget about your brother and all this stuff, and which we shot, but we just didn't need it. So we cut it out.
The other family member kind of gone would be the other brother. Yeah. Was Charlie Cray?
No, I had him written in, and he didn't have a line by the time I was done with the rewrite, and he didn't figure in what they were doing. Anyways, he was older than they were, much straighter, but a gangster also, but really more just they kept him around and gave him some clubs to manage and stuff like that to keep him out of trouble. And he didn't figure into the story, so I took him out.
The logistics for the dramatic scenes with Tom Hardy playing with himself sound really complicated, but I want you to talk us through the fight that takes place in their casino at Esmeralda's barn, because it is very complicated, and I'm curious how much of that moment by moment was on the page, going from grabbing somebody's balls, putting a jacket over their head and punching them out. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I'm curious how much was kind of discovered with your stunt people versus what you wrote moment by moment on the page.
Yeah, it was interesting because they were boxers, and they had very different styles. Reggie was a much more polished counterpuncher, and Ron steamed in and threw haymakers, so we knew we wanted to have a bit of that. And we knew we wanted to escalate it because they're brothers, so they're not trying to kill each other. It's not like fighting a guy like one of the guys in the first fight. So there's some restraint involved also that falls away as it goes along. But Tom and the fight coordinator rehearsed it a long time and walked. I'd go and visit every couple of days when I was scouting and look at what they were doing. But they did a lot of it. And then once we had the location, we refined it for the location. And very much wanted it to be character revealing in a way, the way it went. It was the only place we did face replacements, so we had not too many, I think 5. And it's mostly just old-fashioned. You're over here on the swing and over here on the hit and things like that. But was also the slap boxing part of it, the first half of it, they really hit each other, which helped me a lot. I didn't have to worry about faces. I didn't have to worry about missed punches.
Well, it was a funny fight in that sense, in the way that you would see brothers slap fighting, the way they start, where they're not really sure they're going to hurt each other, but then it turns really violent. But as you said, it's character driven because by the end, it's this kind of revelation of feeling left out, of the love triangle that you created between them and Francis.
Yeah, and the subtext of the scene that we talked about was that what Ron really wants to do is get rid of Francis so he can get his brother to himself. And that's, if he's got to have this huge fight with him, that's how he's going to do it. As far as pulling the coat over his head, it was a good way to get rid of his face.
That's practical. I like it. It's a good way to fight too. But Ron was mentally ill. He wasn't taking his meds, but there was this moment of clarity that you kind of highlighted in which he had this passion and this fantasy for starting a utopian city in Nigeria where he would be more respected than Britain. I'm curious what else you found out about that kind of wild plan in your research. What else you could tell us?
We didn't have the luxury to show it, but he went to Nigeria and he toured some jails. That was one of the big things he wanted to do. And met with all these Nigerian officials, paid $5,000 kind of seed money to grease the wheels over there. And then Leslie Payne was going to sell shares in it and try to get involved, like a big con game, really, once he heard about it. So that was very interesting. And his interaction with Boothby is what kept him out of prison. So Ron, he was operating on a different level, but he was operating.
Sure. Editing is the last stage of storytelling, and I'm kind of curious, this was about 2 hours and 11 minutes, I think, and what was your longest cut? What were some of the things that you hated to see go? Tell us about what you learned in editing.
I mean, the assembly, you cram everything into the assembly. I forget, the assembly was probably 250 or something like that. But you knew watching stuff you were going to take it out or trim it or shorten scenes. And editing is a rewrite, in a way. And the funny thing is when you shoot, you build collateral that you don't know you're building. And different things happen, and different things that you think you needed to explain more thoroughly, you don't need to explain. So I always enjoy it when I cut something out of the film. The film doesn't need it anymore. The rest of it's holding it all up. But we got it to 222, or it was the last 10 minutes that were hard to cut.
So what was the hardest scene to cut? What's something people might see on a deleted scene on a Blu-ray?
There was a scene I really liked where he met Leslie Payne the first time and interviewed him. And you learn more about him there, but we didn't need it. And mostly it's just trimming scenes. We didn't cut any scenes out. We just trimmed them down to the bone, really.
You had time kind of ticking away in which you needed to tell your story, and some things obviously would get condensed in such a way. I'm just kind of curious, what more did you learn about how the marriage kind of dissolved between them? I'm just curious if there were other things that you played with that showed more of that dissolution.
There was one scene where he came home drunk and they had a confrontation. But it also felt like you didn't add anything to the story. And really, in my own head, it was always that he's a leopard and she wants him to change his spots. And he reaches a point where he resents that, you know, and all the things going on. He's got her on, you know, asking him to not be who it is that he is, which is inherently in there. But that's what for my research, was the difficult. He couldn't have two lives. He couldn't be one thing to her and one thing to everyone else. And he reached a boiling point.
I forgot to ask earlier, what was the budget?
$19 million.
Oh wow, 19 million for 50 days. That's fantastic. So you really decoded something unique in the sense of first there was the love triangle kind of for the brothers with Frances in there, but even after she's gone, their undoing, aside from her being gone, is Ron's problem with Leslie Payne, and wanting to have Jack the Hat bump him off. And I'm kind of curious how you constructed that as to where it would drop and the breadcrumbs that you left all throughout the movie about Ron always having these problems, because it's so odd and such a part of the gangster genre, even though this was real life, to see somebody cut off their most, you know, the person that's most underside and able to solve their business problems. It was just so Ron to do that in a kind of crazy flirt.
Right. Well, yeah, he's self-destructive in a way, but also he's jealous of Payne as well, because Payne's Reggie's guy, and he's not Ron's guy. So it's another barrier to his brother in a way. Is how I always looked at it. And it was also interesting because in all the research I never came across that Jack the Hat had gone after Payne on Ron's behalf until at the very end I found a book that Leslie Payne had written, of which I think they printed 400 copies. And he's the one that described it, how he came to his house one night to kill him. And that's what sent him to the police, and that's what kind of put the final nail in the coffin. But it was just that. It was another, you know, a guy keeping them from being gangsters and being too straight, really, within that world. And again, he was Reggie's guy and not Ron's guy. Another barrier between them.
It was interesting in the murder scene that you know, Reggie, when he kills him, you know, he's taunted by the mention of Frances. Was that something that came out of research, or something that was dramatic?
Yeah, no, I didn't know what happened. There was a confrontation between them that very quickly escalated into this knifing, which was completely out of character for Reggie. He'd never done that.
And he just kind of lost it and was overtaken the way that his brother was. And it's such an interesting scene because he's taunting him with Frances. Ron is secretly cheering that this is going to happen because it was his goal as well. So it's kind of like their goals kind of converging at the end. And it was a very interesting moment. Your piece of dialogue, I thought, really kind of summed up the film, in which Ron asks him, why did he do that? And he says, because I can't kill you. Talk about that piece of dialogue and when you realized that was going to be your kind of closing.
Yeah, I had some other line there, and I came up with that line on a Sunday, just flipping through the script of the scenes I hadn't shot yet and being unhappy with whatever the line was that I had there, which would be probably a much longer couple of sentences. And sometimes in my own head I thought this is a guy with a split personality. There is no Ron. There's only Reggie, and he becomes Ron in his head sometimes. I used to play that game with myself to try to analyze it. But he becomes the out of control slasher basically at the end of the film, and whereas Ron, when he kills the guy he's killing, it's a much more kind of hit, you know, one bullet and in and out. And it just seemed like that's where Reggie was going, and that there wasn't that much difference between the two of them at that moment.
It was a great piece of dialogue. Two last questions before we take a few from the crowd. What was your toughest scene as a writer, and how did you creatively break through it? And what was your toughest scene as a director, and how did you creatively break through it?
Probably the toughest scene was that scene we did that morning. We threw out what we had, and everyone was standing around. And it took us about 4 hours to come up with it. So you had this clock ticking in the background.
You're talking about the scene where Jack the Hat's killed?
No, the scene where he comes home to find Ron and clean up after him after he's killed Cornell. just because it was written under the gun. And as far as directing goes, it was probably the killing McVitie at Blonde Carol, so we had no time to shoot it. And we couldn't get around for all the angles we needed and things like that. So we just had to make do with 2 hours of overtime and a day. And that was probably the trickiest thing to shoot as far as being worried that you hadn't covered it enough.
It worked. We're going to take a few questions from the crowd. You're going to hear me repeat the question for the sake of the podcast. She'd like to hear about the cinematography. She loved it, and she even loved the shot at the end on the river when the camera's clearly in a boat and he's just taking a stroll, maybe his last stroll while he's free.
Yeah, we were in on that shot, we were in a little barge that had about 6 inches of clearance on either side of the canal wall, and we kept hitting it. And the camera would go like that, and we had to do it again. And I didn't think we were going to get the shot. It was a disaster. And we were already getting a dolly out and running along the towpath. But we finally did 2 takes where we didn't hit anything. So all you become worried about is, are you going to hit the side of the wall? Like you stop looking at the monitor, or it's one of those things. So but we had a great location. But the biggest thing we did was we wanted to make the camera unaware of that one guy was playing 2 brothers. So we tried not to do anything too tricky or fancy, like pan from one face across the room over to the other face and come back. We tried not to do anything that the camera was showing off, that we had one guy playing both parts. So there's a kind of classicism to it, especially when it's Reggie and Ron, and then we're a little freer with when one of them's not there. And then the big shot that we were very proud of was the Steadicam shot through the club when he takes her on the first date, because it's a gangster movie, so you want to be brave enough to try to do your own Steadicam shot, even though you're going to get compared to the one that you can never compare to. But it also, I thought, showed Reggie in all his different forms in one shot, which was great. So you see him with the doorman, and you see him at the bar, and you see him with her, showing her around, and glad-handing people, and then dealing with his guys, and going back and dealing with Jack the Hat, and punching him out, and coming back, and sitting down, and going on the date again. And it felt like if we could do all that in one shot, it would really show Reggie, all the things about Reggie that were going to be a problem for him later on.
How many pages was that you did in one take?
I think it was about 7. Yeah.
And how many takes did it take to get it right?
Yeah, 9. Well, we had like 3 good takes, but and it was quite a night that night.
How was Meyer Lansky involved in the story from your research?
Well, because all the casinos in Havana had shut down, and he was heavily involved in those casinos, and he was looking for a new place to put his energy into, besides Las Vegas. And they decided, because gaming laws in London had just been changed, and it was much more casino friendly. So he had bankrolled a couple of places and was trying to get casino business in London. They had George Rath. He hired George Rath to be a greeter at one of his. It was called the Colony Club in Mayfair. And the Crays were hired to provide doormen and security and safeguard things, and that was all really happening.
It's cool, I'd never heard that part of the story. His curiosity was your approach concerning the thematic of restraint, where here it was kind of restrained and then kind of things blew up at the end, versus your directing style on 42.
Yeah, I mean, that was the cross Jackie Robinson had to bear, was that he couldn't retaliate. So a lot of the film is showing him not retaliating, or a lot of key moments in the film, except on the field, at that. And in this, I guess Reggie's kind of under a lot. He's under a lot of pressure in his own way, and it's coming to a boil, and it does come to a boil in a couple of places when he attacks her and when he attacks Jack. But I haven't really thought about it. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I think that it exists in both movies for sure.
A few more questions. He loved the music and he was curious about how much of it was your choice versus your music supervisor's.
Yeah, no, I picked probably 75% of the tracks, and my editor did probably the other 25%, because I would pick things that just wouldn't work when he cut them. And then he was always on the hunt for stuff in a similar vein. So between the two of us, we picked all the music. We had some other music in there we couldn't afford, and that was okay too. And then Carter Burwell, the composer, had to come in and marry it all together and make it all work, and provide the thematics for the character that the tracks didn't provide. I mean, the tracks play the 60s really well, and we wanted the music to be part of that world, but the Carter Burwell came in and played the characters and made it all work.
His score was great. A few last questions right to you, sir, in the blue shirt.
There are lots of really fine actors from the British Commonwealth, and you seem to work with all of them. I mean, what is it that you find intriguing about working with so many British and Australian actors?
What did you find intriguing about working with so many great British and Australian actors as director?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. The British actors just nail everything. You know, this is a 3-take movie. We're on 3 takes almost the whole movie. 2 takes sometimes, because they just nail it and there's nothing else to do except move on. And the Australians I just find so natural, and they have such a kind of star quality to them, you know, in an unassuming kind of way, in a very unforced kind of way. But it's not a plan really, but they're all great, and
Fair enough.
They don't come over here much. They should.
All the way in the back of the hat. He was curious what your boundaries might have been with Ron concerning the gay content of the film, Ron's character, and he commends you on the way that Ron was very upfront about it, even talking to the Italian gangsters and being very out and about with it.
Right. Well, that was part of who Ron was, and it was. I don't know what year the law changed, but it was 64. Until 1964, it was a criminal offense to be gay in Britain, and he was always very upfront about it. Someone had said to me, "Well, he could get away with it because he was a gangster," and I said, I think that made it a little harder even. But we just showed it. We showed it. He's got his boys with him and things like that. I don't have a love scene with him and anyone, and I don't have a love scene with Reggie and anyone. So it's just kind of his affection, kind of you can see between him and his guys and things like that. But it just felt like the way to play it was the way I played it. I never thought about it too much.
Yeah, it totally worked. Right here, you man in the front row. You said the script to Tom Hardy, you knew you wanted him in that role. Were there any actors that really surprised you, that you weren't sure that you were going to cast him in that role, that kind of came out of the woodwork?
Chris Eccleston, I was surprised by. I hadn't pictured him for that part. He came in and met, and we met for coffee or something someplace. And he just said, "What kind of dog is Nipper Reed?" And I just give me a dog and I'll play the dog. And so I said he's a bloodhound, and he said, "Okay, I'll be a bloodhound." And that was it. That was my. And I said, "Okay, he wants to be a dog. I'm going to cast him." And that was my entire conversation with him about his character, really, the whole show. And which was always kind of fun. It's simple and odd stuff.
He's on a trail, he's picking up a scent, all that stuff.
Yeah, and won't give up. Like the dog in Cool Hand Luke, he won't stop running until he dies. So, Blue was his name. Anyways, it was. They would just come in and you knew you had them. They'd come in and you just. The great thing about being a director is that you have so much help and you have so much. You're like at the head of the circus kind of. But it's a great. You don't have to teach the knife thrower how to throw knives. He knows how to do it. You just say a little to the left or a little to the right.
Exactly. I think there was one right there. You, sir, you'll be our last question from the crowd. Interesting question. He had a family member that had mental illness, and he said that something that he noticed that was so interesting and deep about your portrayal of Ron in the movie is how occasionally he would have these moments of clarity and possible prophecy sometimes too. And he's curious if that came from research or it came from somebody that you knew in your own life and had observed those kinds of moments.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly researching it and things, and I was struck a couple of times by people talking about these moments of very clearly seeing things and how things were, and I thought it was an interesting thing to add to his character. He was very honest about things in real life.
And it was clear he wasn't taking his meds either.
Yeah, no, he would go a long time without taking, like you start to feel better and you don't think you need to take them anymore and that kind of thing. And there was something Buddha-like about Ron, I thought. So we tried to get all that in there. But it wasn't a personal experience, it was more from research.
What's next? What are you working on next that's coming up, possibly as a writer or a director? Or is there an old script that you want to dust off and take off the shelf?
I have no idea. I think it's Sony, but they all have 5, so I'll send out any emails.
Did you revive it somewhere else?
No.
It's trapped at Sony. What was it that was trapped at Sony?
It was a remake of the old Western Professionals, the Lee Marvin or Lancaster.
Oh, wow.
But a modern day version of it.
I would love to see that. Is there anything else that's active?
No, I'm unemployed, so.
This guy's looking for a job. All right. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I can't wait to see what you do next. Good luck.